Hello, are you new to DCS and trying to learn dogfighting? Is it going well? I'm going to say yes, it is, even if it feels like it isn't. You're flying around in one of the best combat simulators of all time, and you're learning, so today's a good day. Welcome to the 311 Griffin universe. Let's talk about dogfighting. First, I want to point out that this video is specifically for new players who are pretty fresh. Additionally, some of these tips are more geared towards modern jets, but the concept should still be somewhat helpful for older planes. And I have one more disclaimer as well. I'm certain you're aware that there are myriad videos and other guides that exist in the universe that go into really good and highly technical detail about ACM, BFM, OODA loops, and decision making, and every other subject that is important to dogfighting and BVR combat. Understand that I'm not making this video to say those things aren't important. They absolutely are, and you should learn them. However, as I was attempting to learn dogfighting, I finally realized that I was focusing on highly technical concepts that I could not always implement. It doesn't hurt to go study those things, and you should, because you eventually need to know them. However, I sat down and thought about a handful of ideas that a new player can start implementing now without having to learn the highly technical stuff and try to implement it. I'm not going to tackle any difficult concepts at this point for two reasons. One, I'm not good enough to tackle most of them. And two, many of them are already covered about as well as they can be covered by other people. For instance, if you really want to understand the concept of corner speed, which you do, go over to the flankertraining.com YouTube channel. I'll link the video in the comments. Best video about corner speed I've ever seen. If you want to understand the very basics of why rate versus radius matters, I do happen to have a video that I think is very good for that, and I'll link that in the description as well. There are a plethora of videos that go over pursuit curves and ACM. Pretty much any basics of dogfighting video that you find is going to cover those, and in my experience, most of those are basically the same. So just pick your favorite one and watch it. The same goes for just about any other concept you want to learn, although as they get more difficult, there's going to be less videos that actually go into those things. So these tips that I'm about to talk about don't require much of you other than a little time in the seat. This is about implementation of behavior to build better habits, and it is not about highly technical concepts. So, number one, learn your turn, aka know how your plane handles. Get in your plane in a known configuration with no enemies and just start turning. Try to hold a specific speed doing level turns. After turning at that speed for a bit, maybe 2 full turns, either start over so that you have the exact same fuel load, or just pull a little harder on the stick or drop your throttle until you get to a lower speed. And once you get to that speed you want, stabilize and keep turning. Just do this at different speeds. You'll notice how the plane handles differently. This concept can benefit from watching that flanker training corner speed video that I mentioned and that I've linked. It'll also help if you have Tacview, where you can take notes about your G and your turn rate and your turn radius. You can get a free license of Tacview, and I will link to Tacview in the description as well. Keep in mind that this technique is not a super surgical way to get this data, but what you're trying to do is teach yourself that you don't necessarily want to be going 600 knots, and you definitely don't want to be going 200 knots, at least not in a Viper. It depends on the plane. But once you've done this a few times, you can slap an enemy AI or find a friend and put them in and just turn with them a bit. Test out slower speeds, test out faster speeds, find where your plane turns best. And you can also look this data up and find EM diagrams and things like that. And I do encourage you to do that. But at the very least, you need to get in the sim and test it out a bit so that you trust the numbers. And that rolls into our second point, which is trust your plane. When you let your plane have the energy it wants, it will turn. This is quite difficult at times, especially for newer players, because it also depends what you're up against. And most new players' instinct is to turn as hard as possible. New players also often want to reverse their turns all the time. And most of the time, that's a bad idea. There are very specific times when you should reverse, but more often than not, you're better off to find your plane's best rate or best radius sustainable and just stick with that. I can't tell you much about when to reverse specifically because I'm still learning that, but just be patient with your turns and keep your energy up. Trust your plane. Be patient. Number 3, did I say keep your energy up? I absolutely meant it. Keep your energy up. Don't bleed energy off turning hard all the time. They say energy is life, and they are correct. Your energy doesn't have to be too high, it just has to be high enough that you can turn well and so that you have energy to trade. Then, just like before, be patient. There are situations where you want to trade your energy out. Defensively, you'll need to do excursions at times to dodge missiles or to get out of a gun solution from a bandit that's behind you, and if you're already low on energy, you're just going to die. From a neutral or near neutral situation, there will be times when an excursion can get you into an offensive position. These are hard to read at times, but if the relative positions and directions of the planes are favorable, a well-timed excursion can put you in the offensive, and you'll recognize these better over time once you do them. If you don't have the energy, you just can't do it. Offensively, the excursion gets your pipper on target. So this third rule, simply stated, is, if you haven't detected it yet, it is that you can't exchange energy that you don't have. Okay, number 4. This one's 100% black and white, hard and fast rule in a modern jet. Never, ever, ever use your air brake. Ever. Don't touch it when you're fighting. Sure, there may be a case when you just misjudge the closure rate and you're going to overshoot. This is fairly common, especially on a 2D screen in a simulator. But honestly, I've never had a case where I was going to overshoot and the air brake stopped me from overshooting. It's never happened. If you're much faster, you're better off to either pull away or do some very specific maneuvers that you can learn that will create more distance that you're traveling, and you can maintain your energy and spacing. These are difficult for new pilots, but just don't touch your brake, especially in a modern jet. Use pursuit curves and throttle to maintain spacing and practice observing the closure rate, and you'll become a better pilot. Number 5, don't stall your plane. Against AI, it can be very tempting to use gimmicks to exploit their programmed behavior. Recently, I've even seen a lot of conversation online encouraging doing hammerheads and stall turns in a Hornet to kill the ace AI. It works, it's fun to do sometimes, but it develops bad habits. For years, people have talked about how awesome Pugachev's Cobra was for combat. Not everybody, but some people believe that it's a really good maneuver for combat. It's an airshow maneuver. It's impressive. It shows how agile the airplane is, and I love it, but you shouldn't do it in combat. Energy is king. Don't stall your plane, and don't let the AI cause you to develop bad tactics for your repertoire. The 6th and final tip, and now we're talking about the pipper. We're talking about predicted impact point, and it's mostly for modern jets. I pretty much only fly modern jets, and I'm terrible at warbirds. I have to have my fire control radar. I'm sorry. But this can still sort of apply to older aircraft in that you need to be patient with your pipper, and you need to learn the aerial gunnery and then be patient. Don't just spray bullets. You only have so many of them. So in a modern jet, the FCR and the HUD do the heavy lifting for you. So be patient. Let the pipper settle on the target, give them a burst. You don't have to spray a long string of bullets. In fact, this is one area where I think I'm a bit better than most of the DCS players that I've watched online. Of course, all of them would probably kill me 10 out of 10 times if we were against each other because they just fly better than me. But at least I don't waste my ammo. Honestly though, you will become a better pilot if you stay patient and only give a burst when there's a solid chance of hitting, and that takes patience. Of course, there may be cases where you're going for a snapshot or just trying to get lucky and you need to push out a longer string of bullets, but it shouldn't take a 3-second string. Also, ambushing is a tactic that requires a little bit more lead because you're starting with the pipper in front of them and then you're letting them fly through the string of bullets. You can also do this in reverse, where you have the pipper behind them and you start firing before you do the energy excursion. But in my experience, those aren't necessary. Okay, and in most 1v1 fights especially, if you're flying the plane correctly, you shouldn't need it. settle the pipper, trust it, squeeze a quick burst, and that's all you're going to need in most cases. So that's it. Those are the tips. Again, these are things you should be able to start applying to your dogfighting right now. They aren't highly technical. They aren't even that exact. They're pretty subjective. But they also don't take a vast, deep knowledge of difficult concepts. As I said earlier, I do encourage you to dive into those difficult concepts because that's where you need to get if you want to be very good. I'm not there yet in most cases, and I've been studying this stuff for a long while. So the name of the game, just like several of the points we talked about in this video, is patience and practice, even on the difficult stuff. So I hope this is helpful to new players, and I hope it gives you some things to try that will help you develop your skills a little bit and get to a point where you can start digging into those more difficult concepts. So in conclusion, stay safe, have fun, happy flying, and thanks for watching.